He laughed about a lot of stuff. And you can't blame anybody for getting duped by him because he's really good at it. Superficial charm. Immediately like him. Immediately like him. Don't feel bad if you found yourself laughing at some of the stuff he said, because he's good at it. After he began talking with Amanda, it wasn't long at all before he was living there. He also walked right into a social worker's office and sat down and said, I want my son back, I'm going to do this right. And you know, when he was talking all about that, and we were talking about duping people, he was like, well, you know, it took me a little longer with them, but I cried, and he cried. He can cry just like that. You saw his mood go back and forth on a dime. Don't think he's not in control of that. Sometimes when people don't cry, inferences are drawn. Sometimes when they cry appropriately, inferences aren't drawn. Obvious ones. He went to probation and parole and gave him a false address, which he maintained for some time. Indicated he changed his address, take that or leave it, I don't care. They lied to him. That's the third set of people he duped in days, weeks maybe, days. Joshua Young is in foster care at that time. His mother passed away, and he's in foster care. He's living with a foster family, a very loving foster family. And he wanted to live with his father. Who doesn't want to live with their father? Whoever their father is. He's his father. Time goes on. This very typical horrible situation within the house at 1356 Venn Drive escalated a lot more quickly than we think about in these situations. And if you think back to some of the telling things that Gowker said up here, he is very, very funny, very happy, very sad, very quick. That's what he said. Every once in a while, what he's really about comes out if you pay attention. Amanda understood where this was going, and she understood she had to terminate her pregnancy, and then she did that. And he was furious about that. He took his child, and don't think that he cared about that child. It was his possession, and you don't take things from him. All the while, this crazy escalation is going on. The Perfect Family Front is being put up to CPS. In January 2011, Joshua Young had just started getting to stay the night over there in the middle of all of this. He wasn't even back in his father's temporary custody yet. That didn't even happen until the end of March. In this chaos, they gave him back, and he wanted to go. That's his father. It's his father. He'd been there 6 weeks, and Trey was dead. May 10th, May 11th. May the 8th, 2011, Amanda quit her job. This escalation, any minute, you can feel it coming any minute now. This is classic stuff. You can't work. I don't want you to work. I will control you. That guy was not going to let her out of his sight. 48 hours later this happened. 48 hours later this happened. A series of pickouts ensues. And it's obvious that Jeremy McFarland was really worried about his sister at that point, because he hadn't really talked to her at all. And obviously you can assume he was hearing some of this stuff from other family members, because he just kind of showed up. And you remember what he said? He pulls up and Gowker is scowling until he rolls his window down. He was just trying to get into this situation and diffuse it and protect his sister. And there is nothing wrong with that. But it's not a coincidence that he showed up over there 2 days later and confirmed what he already knew by looking at her neck. And she told him, no, that's Hickey's. And we're not demonizing Amanda because we know that this is how this works. And you could tell that he felt guilty because something happened that night when he was there. You can take everybody at their word about the basketball injury, or you can wonder and really think about what really happened to his hand. And good for him if he was trying to protect his sister. Something happened. Something went on all night long. And he went to the ER and he mentioned, you could see that he was just really hesitant. He just really feels bad about not, what if, you know? And didn't take him with him because he wants to sit at the ER all night. Understandable. All kinds of people were supposed to have been at this cookout. Again, let me stop right there. Don't just take these scenarios as to who was there and what happened and everything else because people keep saying it over and over, because that's how he does it. Just remember that. You heard from several people that Cassie and John, who live at 1360 Vim Drive, 2 houses away and closer to the ditch line, were there with their 2 kids, and their 2 kids are Michael and Shannon. You heard that Amanda and that Gowker and that Kinsey and that Trey and that Joshua Young were there. Jeremy McFarland was there for a while, but he left because he got hurt somehow. And some other neighborhood kids. Pay close attention when it gets really vague like that. Don't just assume that that's what they're talking about. Why do you think I kept doing that with John? The kids. What kids? Because once you start really, they're simple questions. They're not trick questions. Who? Who are you talking about? I don't recall sometimes. I'm not going to put those words in John's mouth because I'm not positive that he said that. You heard that from a lot of other people, though. At some point, there's a turtle. This turtle is just kind of a wild card issue in this case, and I think it means absolutely nothing other than Gowker had to get down there so he could leave evidence that he had been there at some point because, well, he just does that. From that point forward, nothing is clear, and we don't know what the heck happened that night. And what you have to do is accept that we'll never know. Don't convict this boy because you don't know and he didn't cry at a funeral. We disputed that, obviously. We're insulted that we had to, but don't just convict because you don't know. We don't know who unscrewed the back porch light bulbs. We don't know why they did that. We don't know if it's because Amanda and Josh Gowker were going to have sex. We don't know if it's because Josh Gowker was going to ambush somebody. We don't know if Jeremy McFarland was going to come back and this was we don't know. We do not know. And we won't. And you won't. And I'm not going to represent to you what happened. That's how we got here. We do know some stuff. We do know that Joshua Young went to Cassie's. We know that John was down there. He lives there. We know that Cassie was down there. They went home. They went over there. And John told you that he watched Warriors, a movie, and it was on DVD. And he watched it with Joshua Young, and Joshua Young was in that house. You heard all kinds of stuff about, well, this was coming from Gowker, and I believe also from Amanda, back and forth to Cassie's house. Don't forget what I said. Maybe, maybe not. If you don't have more than words from that guy, and unfortunately from Amanda, think about it. Just think about it. And who cares if they were? Who cares if they weren't? people present inside 1356 Bim Drive, we think it's a fair assertion to say, was Amanda, it was Gowker, it was Kinsey, it was Trey. We know that Amanda and Gowker, the only two people on earth, say and have said, and there's that repetition, and suddenly it's a fact. That's how he does it. That's how he does it. We know that they say, they give you an explanation for the light bulbs, and there's dispute as to who unscrewed those, and they were, well, actually, I think at trial, Amanda indicated that she wanted to clean in the dark, I believe, because the lights coming on was annoying back there. Either way, the story goes, Trey opens the door fully dressed. In some accounts, he says nothing. In others, there's a brief discussion. In some accounts, he just shuts the door. In other accounts, Amanda walks in, stands at the bottom of the steps. Get your butt in bed. That's that. Nothing's clear, and we'll never know, and you just have to accept that. Meanwhile, where's Joshua Young watching Warriors? I don't know. We do know that Gowker killed Trey early that night because of what was in his stomach. By all accounts, there's no way he could have had that much food in his stomach, and a lot of it, or some of it anyway, hadn't even begun to get digested. At one point, Gowker throws out this "he ate my leftovers" stuff. Don't forget he was indicted, so he's seen discovery. Video doesn't lie, though. He knows that. He acknowledged that. He enjoys being recorded, obviously. You saw how he was acting. We do know one thing about where he was that night and where Amanda was, and that is for a 2 to 5 minute window, they were at Circle K on Preston Highway buying 2 packs of cigarettes, one for each person, their brands, Marlboro Reds, Marlboro Lights. We know this because just like he always does, there's an empty pack of both in the bedroom wastebasket with a banana peel and a white grape wrapper. Some things just are too perfect. They're just too perfect. On that note, don't forget, there is no video. There is no video, and they got caught lying about that. Because when Gowker was at homicide with his phone in his hand, talking to the detective, he knew the more graphic he described what was on his phone to support this alibi. It's all about alibis for him. And you can only do that with recordings. Really do that. Airtight. Why do you think he went there after he killed him? He pulls his phone out and says, "We made this porn, it involved a banana, you want to see it?" And who wouldn't be like that, you know? And the detective acknowledged that he did that. But Amanda said that that was taped on her phone. There's no video. There's not one. So why is there a banana peel in the bedroom wastebasket with 2 separate empty cigarette packs, one for each person, their brand, Marlboro Reds and Marlboro Lights, and a white grape wrapper? A white grape wrapper was found down there at the spot. It's too perfect. He's toying with them. From there, after Circle K, that's really all anybody knows. Quiet of night. It was really hot the following day, and probably on the 10th. Just silence in that neighborhood. Sun comes up, it's a regular school day. Regular day, school buses coming and going, just the bustle of life, normal day. It's a Wednesday, Derby just happened. Till that afternoon, at some point, and we don't know when, because it's just been all over the map, Trey's backpack is discovered at 1356 Bim Drive. But when Amanda, who's with Gowker, is standing right at the ditch at Vim, which would be past Cassie's from their place, Suddenly she's alerted that there's a body up there. And what does she do? She takes Kinsey to Cassie's, and her and Gowker run through the neighborhood to get to Liberty, despite the fact that and everyone knows that trail is there, and that is the quickest way up there. It's the quickest way to get there. And maybe she knew then, and maybe she didn't, and maybe she knew way before that, and maybe she didn't, but something told her what happened, who it was, and who did it, and he was right beside her. At Liberty, they thought it was a man at first because Trey was a big boy. He was a big guy. And then suddenly that got adjusted down a little bit because people got into the crime scene. I think the detective personally went and, saw the body. They were estimating maybe 16, but they didn't know who he was because nobody reported him missing. So finally, the decision's made that Terry Zwicker can see if it's his son. And when he does that, he falls to his knees and loses his mind just like anybody else would. And 5 minutes later, he was in Detective Russ's car saying, "I know," and he didn't offer this. He was asked, "Do you think this guy's talking about Gowker is capable of this?" "Oh, yeah." And very much takes the high road in giving a little synopsis of what the basis of that belief is. And nobody listened to him. Not that day. Because Gowker and Amanda were separately being interviewed by another detective, and all he was talking about was Bridgewood. And he acknowledged, not that anybody really needs him to acknowledge, that there was a reason for that. It's all strategy. They were going to look at Joshua Gowker, and there's a reason he didn't say, "I have the record, whoa, she looks injured." There's a reason for that. You're going to jail at that point. There was probable cause at that point. He was a person of interest, at least. I want to speak with them more. They did twice at the scene while he sat there and asked to see the body over and over and over and wanted a picture so he could see what he did when it was daytime and see the facial imprint in the ground. And walk back during the visitation and look at it again. It wasn't because he needed to know how Trey died, because he knew, because he did it. Do you really think he didn't do that? Do you really think he would delegate that? He planned this. There is no way. He took a lot of pleasure in doing that to that poor boy. He really did. Gowker was pretty disgusted with the police investigation in this case, and that's why he may or may not have gotten himself indicted. Take those people they called in here and said, "He told me this, he told me that," and demon seed. Take it at what it is. Whether he said those things to those guys or not, we don't care because we don't believe anything he says anyway. So that's where you get stuck. This investigation into Joshua Young, you notice how he's not even coming up? It's because he wasn't even there. Wasn't even there, he has no motive. The reason they even looked at him is because of Joshua Gowker. Because he cried. He cried and he felt horrible for Trey, and they know everything and tell the truth. I love him more than life. Once you know, listen to that again. Listen to all that again. Once you know, it starts, I don't even know how many versions he's told by now. He was asked about all of them, and then some. It starts with, "My son did it, he told me he did it, and I feel horrible." That's how you know he's lying. He doesn't feel anything, ever. That dog was broke. And the very next morning, you heard those calls. You can listen to stuff again. If you need to hear people, please listen to them again. Notice the tone of his voice as each conversation starts. It's different with each person. Does he cry when he's talking to John? No. John, tell the truth, man. He's threatening him. Cassie has to be reminded of loyalty because, I mean, she was going to falsely confess to tampering with physical evidence. That was important to keep her in line. Does he control you? I don't know. But you can listen to that stuff again. And you should, because it's your job. This is a murder case. Over a year goes by. Joshua Young is charged with murder. Not complicity, murder. There's one thing the prosecution committed to in the beginning of this, and that is Joshua Gowker killed Trace Wicker. He had involvement. So for over a year, there was a theory that is no longer their theory. And suddenly, in the court system, we call them snitches. That sounds so negative. There are people that are quite honest that come forward that are incarcerated. And again, I'm not saying whether they were telling the truth or not. I don't really care. Because I know, even if Josh Gowker talked to him, he's lying anyway. You can't get caught up in that merry-go-round. Because if you just step back and look at the big picture, why would he be trying to save his son from this murder conviction? Everybody seems to think it's going to happen. If he dropped him in to begin with, it's just round and round and round. And you know, there's a lot of stuff that you probably figured out while he was up here. But you might not fully appreciate until you really think about it. It's not the physical violence so much for that guy. He likes to mess with your head. He likes it. And he's good at it. And he duped the police. And then he duped them again. And he duped everybody. He's good at it. He's just good at it. At Liberty, Gowker ran that scene. He talked nothing but let me see the body and those black kids from Bridgewood. And he laughed about that over and over. And when I said you had to have a red herring, he said you gotta. And there's something about him, even then, that your guard just comes down. Even when he's talking about stuff like this, he's likable. He was allowed to have Amanda in his interview, despite the fact that that flies in the face of policy for any criminal investigation, particularly one this serious. He was allowed to see the body after just on and on and on with two separate detectives an hour and a half after they knew for sure who it was. And had to know this guy is somebody we got to look at. It's not Joshua Young's fault that that stuff happened. It's not, oh, well, we didn't follow that, but, you know, that means that he was just trying to see the body because he really didn't do this. That's not fair. That's not fair at all. There was a very selective collection of evidence from 1356 Vim Drive on May 11th, 2011. A total of 4 pieces of evidence was collected from that house. And that's because initially the assumption was it had to be something sharp. There were 3 bats in the house that sat there until June the 6th when the house was searched again, and that's all they took that time. And the explanation was, well, that pertained to the animal cruelty investigation. They took a couple of knives the first time and some swabs, not from him, from Amanda and from Gowker. There's the issue of phones, and we talked about this. They never got Gowker's records. They tried. Much later, tried to get them, and those records were gone. There were 2 phones that were connected to that 356 number, which we confirmed was Gowker's. And as of when Gowker left town and ended up in Alabama, that phone was in Cassie's possession, and they talked on that phone. We went through the phone records, how many calls there were to that 356 number. We didn't give an exact number. We didn't sit there and count them. But the detective agreed they were always on the phone. And Cassie's work number's on there too. And Angelique's number's on there too, as late as November 2011. These people were all talking. It's harder for him to keep the control when he's incarcerated, but he can do it, and he did. And that was one of the reasons, as he laughed in agreement with me, he knew he couldn't get arrested that day because, well, it is harder. It's possible, but it's harder. Plus, there's the recording issue, and he used that when he needed to his advantage and didn't when, just totally circumvented the jail call system. Because you can talk on the phone without anybody knowing who is on there. But after Alabama, the detectives drive straight back to Louisville, get Cassie on the phone for a minute, talk to her, and they go arrest Joshua Young for murder, and that's what they had. They had probable cause, we're told, that day. Reasonable minds can disagree. You've heard that Joshua Young confessed to several people, all of whom came in. One of whom said she didn't know if Mr. Gowker controls her. But let's start with Angelique. She's hid Joshua Gowker out twice now. You can review testimony. If you don't take me at my word for what she said about the U.S. Marshals coming over, watch that again. Just watch it again. They dropped their card off at one point. What? I thought he was in jail in Alabama. It's a completely ridiculous explanation, and she was happy to see him. That's just all there is to it. Because he's so likable, even though he's dangerous. On the phone in Alabama, Gowker plays her and Jahara against one another. There's a reason for that. Jahara couldn't recall anything at all because she was being drugged. She said she wasn't drinking, but in fact she'd previously said she was drinking. We talked about what happens when you mix whatever she was taking, that she claimed she was taken by force. That wasn't her fault. She can't remember it. It's all a blur, except for one gleaming moment. She was totally sober, and this horrible version of events comes out. It's just really wicked sounding. And that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And Angelique and Jahara both told you they're scared of this guy. There's a reason he had to tell them that it was okay to talk. And he was never going to tell them it was okay to accuse him of murder. All you've got to do is put Joshua Gowker in the spot that Joshua Gowker put him in. That's all he's doing, a little transference, as I asked him. That's all it is. It's not a difficult case to understand. Get past this stuff with this guy. John gives two versions of this confession. One of them involves essentially the exact same word-for-word version that Gowker gives the police. The whole thing about what time is it, he pulls his phone out, goes to put it back, and I just hit him. He says it in the same words as Gowker. And I asked him, does that sound familiar to you? No. Or maybe he didn't recall. Joshua Young then allegedly strips all his clothes off, runs naked through the neighborhood, drops them in a dumpster. I don't know. I don't even know. Disposes of the weapon. And the second version, that's more in line with Cassie's. Dumping evidence. The weird thing about John is he tells you that the morning after Trey died, but before a body was found, Gowker told them Trey was dead. Of course, he also says that Joshua Young did it. Never says how anybody really confirmed that at that point. It's all a matter of transference. Just don't get caught up in it. Step back and look. If he's got a hand in what's being said, just disregard it. Just disregard it. That's how we got here. And they're all communicating. Cassie and John are a couple, a dysfunctional couple, and that's not criticism, but I think we agree. And there's a control thing going on there too. But the communication, if you're talking to Cassie, you're getting to John. If you're talking to Angelique, you're talking to Jahara. Jahara lied about the last time she had talked to Angelique. I never talked to her again. She lived with Angelique's mom at 1242 Springdale. We went over that. We went over that a couple of times. She couldn't remember where she went when she got back to Louisville, but she knew right around this time she lived at Angelique's mom's. Angelique confirmed she lived at Angelique's mom's. And Angelique told you the last time they talked was August 2011. There was a lot going on in terms of falsely accusing Joshua Young of murder at that point. There was a lot going on. They all got their story straight because they were all talking. And this guy's always talking. As for the medical testimony, it's clear something skinnier than a Louisville Slugger was used to kill this child. I'm not going to put graphic pictures up here because they upset everybody, and I understand that. All you have to do is look at those injuries that are diagonal. All you have to do is look at them. There is no way that a full-size Louisville Slugger bat did that. There's no way. And don't forget about that picture where Cassie fills in blood. That's how you know this is ridiculous. It's like a game of Clue almost after a while. It's more than reasonable doubt. It's way more than that. It's also very apparent that those injuries were inflicted by one person. You saw this demonstration, and that really highlights what Dr. Nichols meant. Look at those injuries. Same positioning. The person was in the same position, and he demonstrated how that would be inflicted. What about his facial injuries? Joshua Gowker didn't expect me to ask him whether he sneaks up behind people all the time, but he does, and he acknowledged that. Don't take him at his word. He sneaks up behind people. He punches them in the face hard. He's violent. He's very, very violent. He strangles people from behind sometimes. Don't forget those injuries to Amanda's neck. He comes up behind you. It was a sneak attack. That doesn't mean that Joshua Young did anything at all. He walks up behind you. He's a coward. 72-year-old man in his car, choking him with his own belt and punching him in the face with the other hand, his right hand, to the left side of the face. Keeping somebody hostage, that sounds familiar, overnight, after sneaking up behind him, punching him in the face and kicking him while he's down, and he acknowledged that. The experts might disagree on what happened to Trey's face, but that puts it to rest. This guy did this by himself. He wanted to do it all by himself. Nobody else was going to get to do this but him. It was his thing. Joshua Young talked to the police on several occasions. Joshua Young told them he lived at 1356 Venn Drive, and he really didn't most of the time. But you know what? So did Amanda, and so did Joshua Gowker. Nobody was being straight with them about where they lived. And this is a kid that was in foster care who was so happy to be with his dad. Despite the dysfunction going on, that was his dad. It doesn't matter, that was his dad. And you give the address you're supposed to be at when you're involved with CPS. You just do that. And the adults did. listen to that statement at Liberty again. You're always hearing about how he doesn't cry, he just stares ahead like some gremlin or something. He's crying on that tape. He also doesn't know what to answer with. He doesn't know the answers. I believe, listen to that statement again. Just listen to it again. And don't forget, we asked Amanda, did Yowker say anything about Bridgewood as you're going up to Liberty? She did not recall. Robotically did not recall. That guy was planting seeds from way before this happened. But listen to him, because he's crying and he's in shock, like people that feel things. Something ignited in him somewhere, and he says, I was at Cassie's. And you know what? Everybody else did too. There's no dispute he was at Cassie's. There's really no dispute about that at all. There's no physical evidence in this case at all, which is troubling, and I wish there was, because it would completely exonerate Joshua Young. Not that there's a basis to think he did anything anyway, but there's nothing. There's nothing because it wasn't collected. There's nothing because Joshua Yowker planned this quite well and left what he wanted you to think happened where it went. Please look at that picture of the wastebasket. It's ridiculous. It's too perfect. Every single assertion he makes to the police is supported by a piece of property, a banana peel, a video, except he really got one over on that alleged pornographic video that doesn't exist because we just caught him in that lie. And what's left is rumor and innuendo and the shadow of a jerk of a dad. And jerk is such an understatement. He terrifies me. Why? Because he terrifies me. Okay? He doesn't cry. Remember what I said? I cried, and I mean, I got him. I won him over because I cried. I cried. Character assassination. The alternating lights discussion and the he's not my blood discussion. It got really quiet in here when that came up. Did that lady call the police and go, I think somebody might have information about this? He was so cold and callous and he didn't cry and he was staring ahead like some little monster or something. No, they went to her later. She was like, you know, now that I think about it, do you think people in this neighborhood weren't talking about what the heck happened to that kid up there and thought about lights, and people were talking about it? We don't even know the context of that conversation. And who cares? Who cares? Who cares? If that's what you need for a murder conviction, we are all in a lot of trouble. He's not my blood. Again, this is a boy. What is... They're boys. They don't wear their hearts on their sleeve. And even if you don't walk around pouring your guts out, or you're just trying to... he didn't want to talk about it. They said that. He didn't want to talk about this. Never mind the chaos still going on at the house. You heard from Amanda. He's lucky to be alive, and so is she. And so is Kenzie. And that's what it really comes down to, is presumptions, assumptions, inferences. You have instructions in front of you that talk about the presumption of innocence. The police don't have to operate the way that this jury does in terms of these instructions. They got to go with their gut. They got to do that stuff. You got to follow that presumption. You have to hold their feet to the fire. This presumption runs the other way in this courtroom. He's presumed innocent. He's innocent. But those instructions tell you he's presumed innocent. That didn't happen here. It happens from here on out for this boy. Who protects the kids? It's like we just forget about the kids, you know? all the kids in this situation victims because Gowker said so. I don't care what Gowker's motives are. I don't care. I know they don't have anything to do with anybody but his own ego, and you know it too. You know it too. This isn't about loving anybody. People that did what he did don't love people. He doesn't even know what that is. And I really don't hold it against him. He's just incapable of thinking and feeling like people. And that was apparent when he was talking about all this stuff. It was apparent. It's not in there. There's something that's not wired right with that guy. But don't think for a minute that this has anything to do with saving his son, the person he got into this mess to begin with. And that's the thing about him. He gets you so far in, you feel so stupid when you realize how bad he duped you. And then you're just stuck and you just have to decide. You just have to decide, am I just going to try to, play it off? Or, you just got to say, I got duped. They got duped. He likes the psychological torture better than anything else. He will do whatever he needs to do because he's got no conscience. And the abuse continues for Joshua Young, who's been in jail for over 2 years over this, with false allegations of confessions by people who say they don't know if he controls them. You probably really didn't believe that was possible for anybody. I don't know if he controls me. Or I'm afraid. That's legitimate. He's had a lot of fun with this. This was his moment in the sun, He told you he got life. I'm not going to sit, he pled guilty, so our client's innocent. I'm not going to sit here and say that. I don't care what that guy says. I believe he did it because he did it. Don't buy into that stuff. Don't listen to that guy. Don't listen to those people connected to that guy. If you put all of that aside, not that it's believable to begin with at all, because it's factually disproven. If you put all that aside, there is a kid who was sleeping or watching a movie or something somewhat close to the location where a boy was brutally murdered by somebody who really enjoyed themselves. And that's disgusting. It's wrong. It's heartbreaking. But so were hundreds of other people sleeping or watching TV or whatever. He was in the vicinity. And that guy's his father. We did not apologize for a child wanting to live with their parents. Who doesn't want to be with their parents? Who doesn't do that? And look at that interview, the clips that you saw, my life is better with my dad and all that stuff. Okay. Did you notice how he was saying, I'm pretty sure that my dad didn't have anything to do with it either? There's a little bit of brainwashed kind of stuff going on right there. And look at how convinced he is. There's no way his dad would do this. He believed he didn't do it. The whole world was talking. Nobody would tell the police. But it was so apparent. The only person that's told the truth throughout this whole thing has been him, except for the CPS I lived here and I was really over here. And so did everybody else. They all did that too. Why are we here? Why are we here? Send this kid home, wherever that's going to be. Just send him home. He's innocent. It's not a not guilty thing. He's innocent and you know it, and I can't believe that we are here. Send him home. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a 10-minute restroom break. Remember your admonition. Do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anybody else. Be ready to come back in at 10:25.